Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Future Tech podcast series with me, Charlie Sell, the Group MD of Arrows Group. This is a podcast aimed at STEM graduates where I'm interviewing senior leaders, everything from CTOs to chief of staffs, HRDs of tech businesses, asking them a bit about their story, thoughts on emerging technologies and some career advice. So it's a great pleasure. I have Sophie Barlow with me today. Hi, Sophie.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Charlie.
Sophie is the Chief of Staff of Black Swan. Black Swan's an AI software business, a leading company within the market space. So I can imagine a lot around data and artificial intelligence. VR is so relevant right now that Sophie, you've probably been exposed to quite a lot over the past years. How are you today?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Charlie. Very good. And that was a lovely introduction. Very eloquent.
Oh, great. Thank you. I hope I'm getting in practice now. This is sort of podcast number 15. So,
Wow.
You know, it's building a bit of momentum. But so tell us a bit about you.
Well, how early do you want me to start?
Oh, up to you. I never ask a lady how far they want to go back.
Well, it's actually not that long ago, so let's start at university. I went to the University of Exeter, where I studied economics back in 2012. I took a year in industry out where I took my third year out into the world of consultancy, very much acting as a business doctor, but mostly on technology, digital challenges facing firms. I loved consultancy, so decided that was very much the industry I wanted to stick in, but I wanted to challenge myself to go a bit further. So I then did a summer internship with McKinsey & Company on a project from their Paris office, and I then joined them full-time a few years ago now as a business analyst. During my time as a business analyst, that's probably where my interest and passion in technology started to grow. So McKinsey has a huge and growing digital practice, where they work with companies around their digital strategy, the technologies that they use, how they automate, how they improve customer journeys with the technologies that we now have access to. So all very cool and exciting work and accessible for somebody who doesn't really have the hard coding skills that, a lot of people in these industries tend to have. So that was where my career in technology started to grow. And after spending about 2.5 years working as a consultant, I took a chief of staff position with our managing director in the UK and Ireland. And after those 12 months, I thought, well, this is interesting. I love the chief of staff role, but I love technology. So how can I combine those two things? And actually what I'm sure a lot of people listening to this will have seen, especially if they are listening to this because they're interested in the chief of staff role, is that chief of staff roles amongst startups in the tech industry are growing. They were growing a few years ago in Silicon Valley, in the States, but now they're starting to grow in the UK as CEOs, especially historically founders who have become CEOs are interested in this role. So I decided to take the leap, jump out of consultancy and into the world of tech as the chief of staff to Steve King, who's the CEO of Black Swan.
Fantastic. And maybe, because you've really hit a really good point there, that the chief of staff is a growing position, and actually it's people may get it confused sometimes with from an HR function, but it's actually a hell of a lot more. It's quite different in my experience than that, because you are literally the cornerstone of the business, aren't you, when you're working in a founder-led business. What was it like at
Yeah, I say don't say that to the exec team. It's an interesting role, and it's one that CEOs love, but exec teams have some catching up to do, right? Because quite often it's an experienced CEO, it's an experienced C-suite team, and then there's usually quite young, savvy, historically consultants types will come in and suddenly suggest all these changes, right? And they're working hand in hand with the CEO. So it can be challenging for exec teams to keep up. And that's definitely something we can touch on later if we want to. I would say that if I was going to explain the chief of staff role, I would say that it is purely dependent on the CEO and what their needs are. But on the whole, it's kind of, think of your stakeholders as three main buckets. You've got the CEO, and to him or her, you are an advisor, a confidant, an organizer of their life and their brain and their ideas. To the C-suite, you are essentially somebody who helps them excel So you provide them with a structure, you provide them with a cadence that helps them essentially make business decisions in a timely way, and then cascade them through the organization. And then your third bucket is the organization itself, right? And to the organization, you are a listening ear, you are access to the CEO. You're also helping operationalize the organization for executing on the strategy you have set with the CEO and the exec team, right? So there's kind of those three layers. And what you do for each of those three layers is just so dependent on the organization, the CEO, and what they need.
Yeah, wow. So probably one of the most varied jobs I think you can get.
Yeah, it's perfect for the ultimate generalist, which is what I...
Yeah, brilliant. So like you said, you found sort of a passion for digital and tech, and it's something you've lived and breathed now. So what's your thoughts around emerging technologies then, with STEM graduates who are probably listening and wanting to get, and we mentioned pre-studying the podcast, how really practical thoughts rather than what you read in books. Yeah. What have you seen? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll tackle this from sort of the career kind of angle here, because I think this is the advice that I'd want to hear if I was starting my career and thinking about what positions or industries I wanted to enter. And I think, actually the opportunities that technology is providing is pretty industry agnostic at this point, right? Technology and the industry is presented with this awesome opportunity for helping improve our lives and how other businesses on almost every level. It improves our health, whether it's financial, whether it's mental, whether it's physical. It provides us with information that we've never had before. It helps businesses make decisions based on data in a more timely way than they ever have before. And I hate to be sort of a little bit of a cynic, but I think with every opportunity comes risk. And I think this is where the industry is catching up. I think just due to the nature of the tech industry, it's fast moving, it's innovative. Regulators, governments haven't quite kept up with the guardrails that need to be put in place, or how we track, monitor, intervene when something seems to be going off track. And I just don't think that we as society and we as the world and governments and regulators are doing enough to hold our founders, CEOs, exec teams to account for the impact, the claims they're making, firstly, but then actually the technology is leaving on the world. So I think, I say that because I think there's this incredibly exciting opportunity for this new industry that's starting to boom, that's kind of lagging behind technology, which is, ethical technology, ethical AI, like those thought partners. It's less of an audit trail, right? And it's more of a thought partner to those companies, to those great minds, to those great ideas, to say, how can we make sure that we're aware of the intended and unintended consequences that this technology has. And, I'm all for an attitude that says there's an algorithm for everything. But I think there's a problem when we say, okay, the algorithm can replace the human element of decision making that we've relied on for so long. And I think we're seeing, a topical example, right? In the UK, the recent example in the news of us trying to rely on an algorithm to allocate grades for GCSEs and A-levels because we've missed exams. Scotland alone, there were 45,000 students who were downgraded from an A to C to a fail purely because of an algorithm that's based on historical attainment of the students who came before them. So if I am going to a school in a less privileged area, I am less likely to get that A that I very much probably deserve than I am if I am growing up in a more privileged area. So, there's a prime example there of an algorithm that they tried to use it for good, but the unintended consequence was very bad. So I think there's this huge industry that's going to be built around how do we actually make sure that we're partnering to just do better.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more, actually. The AI ethics, data ethics, still, it's just got to be now more and more prevalent in conversation, and like you said, holding people to account, because it can be misused, and it's. I was speaking to one of the director of data at News UK on one of these podcasts, and one of the things that he was quite very aware of was that we have to be careful that technology it's not going to replace human intervention, it's going to supercharge human intervention, because you're always going to need humans to be involved in it, to be able to manage, monitor, and ensure that it's ethical and ensure that it's not being misused. And I think it's a great example of the algorithm for schools, on where if you don't have some human common sense being attached to this, you're it's really damaging.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's also, there's two things that spring to mind there as well, right? This idea that it's the tech industry is only for technical roles, right? That's incorrect, because actually you need the technical roles to build the tech, but you need the non-technical roles to sit beside them and say, what is this tech doing, right? To, sense check it, to be that thought partner. And the other thought that sprung to mind there is, I think the tech industry's got a pretty bad rep from people who sit outside of that tech industry, because they say, oh, technology and robots are taking our jobs. Now that doesn't need to be the case, because like you say, technology is going to improve our lives, but not replace our lives, right, in any way. So a project that I did when I was a consultant in the tech industry was working with a UK insurance provider on how they could automate the claims function. So I crashed my car, I need to make a claim. How do we improve that journey so it not only takes the customer less time, but it improves that experience for them, because they're probably in a highly anxious, highly stressed state. And the answer was yes, use robots to a certain extent to automate that process, i.e. click 1, click 2, so we can put you through to the right person who is very highly trained in talking to somebody exactly like you in exactly your position. So actually the human element became so much more important. In fact, it was at the center of the decision making around how we use tech to help that business. So yes, the business is improving its performance because it's decreasing its costs, because it's just more efficient at what it does, but actually the human is at the element of that. And I think that's a very exciting story.
Yeah, again, and I couldn't agree with you more. The candidate or buyer experience is as important as the tech that sits behind it, isn't it? So actually understanding that, and that isn't always necessarily from a technical mind. That will be from someone who can think maybe a little bit more about the person rather than the speed and the algorithm and what have you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thinking then, because in a nice way, it's not been too many years since you were at uni, which is well done to you. So thinking around, the career advice, and again, now moving on there, a number of our listeners are either just entering the job market as it's the summer's over, or building themselves up to it for next year.
Yeah.
Have you got any career advice, anything that you wish you'd been told, or that you've now learned that you could share?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I've got so much. I'll try and synthesize it into 3 for you, though. I think probably number 1 would be, don't put yourself or let yourself be put in a box of any kind based on what you've studied. I think, never before has the job market been full of so much diverse opportunity than it is today. So definitely don't feel like I studied math and therefore I need to go into a math-based career, if that's not necessarily what you want. Don't feel like you didn't study math and therefore you can't go into a math-based career. Before I took my recent stint with Black Swan as chief of staff, I very nearly joined a social media company in their data science function. I'm not a data scientist, I never have been, but can I work with numbers and can I learn fast? Absolutely. So I didn't need to rule that career out. So I think, let yourself be put in a box. I have so many friends, so many colleagues who, and we were talking about this earlier, who studied economics. Therefore, the university pushed them onto a grad program for, your PwCs, your Deloittes. They went there, they felt a bit flat because ultimately they hadn't really thought about what is it I want to do. So they therefore had to take a step back and do that a little bit later on in life. So you've got, for everyone who's considering the start of their career now, you've got this amazing opportunity to take some risks and to do some experiments and find out what it is you like. So no boxes, please. And probably the second one is don't be scared to experiment as well. So I have jumped sideways quite a few times in my career already. And, I forget this because I get so caught up in the rat race, but we don't have to necessarily see our careers as ladders. We can see it as jungle gyms, right? And we can move sideways, we can move across, we can move up, we can move down, we can learn again. I've got friends who are just leaving McKinsey, taking a year out, going back to education and starting their careers again. And they're, 30 years old. So my advice would be, think about all of the things, all of those boxes that you may or may not want to be in, and try a few, and don't be scared of moving around to find what works for you. Like, we work and live in a gig economy now. We don't work in an economy where you join an industry, you join a company and you're there for 20 years, right? That's just not how it works. So don't ever feel like you're stuck somewhere. And then finally, the final one is probably to just say, don't be scared to go for opportunities. And, given that we're talking about tech, we're talking about an industry that is still very much struggling with inclusion and diversity. If you're a woman, if you are somebody that comes from a less kind of visible background in any way, if you are somebody that comes from a less privileged economic background and perhaps your parents never worked in tech or you don't know anyone who works in the tech world, then don't let that hold you back. Tech industry is still not representative of the world around it, but it will be. But it only will be if people like you, me, everyone who's listening goes for those opportunities, right? So, let's challenge it. Let's challenge the fact that last year, 80% of, new funded companies were male, and 90% of funding went to all male executives. Let's challenge that, right? And let's change. So go for those opportunities, put yourself forward, because if you don't do it now, then when will you? So those will probably be my 3 buckets.
And again, I just think you've hit the nail on the head on all 3. Especially the last one. D&I is something pretty close to my heart as well. As for that exact reason, I have 2 young daughters, and a young daughter and a young son, and I want my daughter to have as much opportunity and to excel as my son will. But it starts from there. I think I was speaking to another CTO actually, a lady, and she commented on something that was really poignant. She said, it's not about finding jobs for diverse people already in the space, because then you're just moving one person from one place to another. It's how do you actually get more people into the funnel, into technology, more diverse people, is studying, learning it, being given the opportunities to then excel. And again, for STEM graduates, I think that's the thing that we can also work on, is how we can make technology and more accessible, studying it, learning it, so that we got more opportunity to go up the ladder. But so I think you poignantly put those 3 buckets as really good pieces of advice. Thank you.
No worries at all. And obviously, if anyone's got any questions, they'll be able to find me on LinkedIn, right? So that they can reach out and we can have a chat at any point. But always happy to share my thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. And what a great way to sign off, because I think that's really kind of you. And for everyone listening, the podcast is posted not only on the careers websites of the universities that we're partnered with, but also on our YouTube and Spotify channel. And as Sophie's mentioned, when we put any links onto LinkedIn, please feel free to reach out to myself or Sophie, who's graciously offered, because it is important that everyone out there, gets to feel like they can speak to people and understand what the job market and what opportunities are there. And that's the point of the podcast. So once again, thank you, Sophie. That's been really, really good.
Thanks for having me.
Great. And here's the next time.